Hello world, you're listening to the PocketGamer.biz podcast with myself, Brian Baglow, and the mobile maven herself, Miss Peggy Ansaltz. Good afternoon, Peggy. How are you?
I am fine. Mobile Maven, that's a new one, Brian. You come up with one every time to amaze me. I am really good, actually, because of our guest, because this is one of the chances we have to be a bit more like a talk show, a little bit edgy, no script. It's sort of like a whatever pops in our head sort of thing. How can that be a bad show? I think this is going to be one of our better ones.
I mean, I hope so,
All right, John, all right. God, jumping all over. No. It's as you can probably tell, we're being joined today by John Wright from Kwalee. Welcome on board, John. Thank you so much for agreeing to come and talk to us.
Brian. No, I really appreciate the offer, guys. It's always nice to get in front of an audience and talk about the subject I love. So, yeah, really happy to be here, and hopefully we'll cover off some interesting questions today and give some good material for the audience out there to listen to.
I'm convinced we can strap ourselves in for this one, Brian, because you may have seen, where isn't John these days, right? He's been talking at a number of events. He's out there being very vocal, just what we need, a champion out there talking about the market, the strengths and weaknesses of the market. So I have to do this. I don't know if you've seen it in LinkedIn, Brian. I know you've been recuperating and sort of chilling after Scotch Games Week. But if you want to talk about strengths and weaknesses in the games market, we have to talk about you personally, John. You are an Iron Man in every sense of the word. Quite a photo, quite an experience, I think. Just sort of share that moment with us. What does that say about you as a person or you as a person in the games industry?
Yeah, look, God, I'm a little bit embarrassed if I'm honest, but yeah, so I just completed Hypercasual London in the Open, which essentially it's an up and coming thing, but it's fitness racing. It requires long endurance running, as well as like a lot of different highly physical strength-based activities in a race format. So I've got, it's start to finish, and I've got to do a certain number of things in a certain way, and then I eventually get the time to break. But I like training. I think there's a direct correlation between, strong body and strong mind. That's a Marcus Aurelius sort of stoic sort of ethos. But yeah, and essentially I got into this only in the last couple of months, but I've been a big fan of sports and a big player of sports for my entire life. I was sort of captain of East London Rugby Club for nearly a decade, and one of my proudest moments outside of professional work is leading that team to championship victory and winning the league as captain of a team of 25 people that I call friend and brother. So yeah, sports and sort of high intensity stuff is something that I've always been a fan of, something I've always been part of. And again, I think I get a lot of my strength in business and general management from my history of being a captain of sports and then loving sports.
And it's great to hear, because all too often people look at those working in the games industry and see people who never leave the screen, never get out the office, and it can cause problems. And it's very timely, because we were just chatting before we started recording about the fact that Kwalee is holding its first event early in 2024, and we've got PGC London coming up. I've just run Games Week. So welcome to the world of events.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, a huge shout out to the whole marketing team that have been preparing this. I think, a brainchild of Harry Lang and our VP of marketing, and shout out to Kieran, Adam and Ryan and a lot of the people that are putting this together. We think it's about time that Kwalee gets, onto the big stage and starts to, come together with the people that we partner with, as well as, from a publishing perspective, as well as being part of this industry. We're all together. We're a big believer in, a high tide rises all ships. And going to market and producing something where we were able to showcase a bunch of content and the stuff that we have learned in our 12 years of business to a wider audience. We believe, again, what's good for the ecosystem is good for us. And we're really looking forward to hosting our first online event. And touch wood in the future, I would love for us to do a physical event. I was just at RovioCon last week, and I absolutely loved it. And I would love for Kwalee at some point to do something, maybe not as grand, but something.
So are we waiting for QualiCon? But probably not.
I think this is dipping the toe, Peggy, but look, you'll be the first person on the list. You'll be the first invite I send out if we do it eventually, okay?
You're on.
That would be great. And you know what works well at events, John? Live podcasts. Just saying, throwing that out there.
Very funnily enough, I've just agreed to one at PGC. I'm going to do a live podcast from PGC this year.
We're doing some too, aren't we, Brian? Brian, aren't we doing some as well? We are.
That's the plan. That is
There
the
you
plan.
go.
Yeah, we should be there. So
we'll grab it.
We may just be part. Exactly. We'll be able to rugby tackle people as they go past. John, we might be looking for some tips.
Aim low and hit them hard. That's it. That's the tip.
Man and ball. Okay, we're going to move on. So Kwalee itself, you know, in the last year, the company's been making some big moves into sort of the whole hybrid casual space. Can you talk to us about that? And what drove you, or what led you in that direction? What kind of success have you seen?
Sure. So I think to start off with that, I believe that, you know, it's been very easy to understand the evolution of hybrid, in my opinion. And what I mean by that is hypercasual had all of the elements of success. You know, we saw more launches in market, we saw more names in market, and, you know, studios that previously would never have an opportunity to get to the top of the charts were able to do this because of the stickiness of the games and the, you know, the very addictive core mechanics and all of this other stuff. And it became an easy entry point for a lot of studios to develop something, you know, very interesting and also very quickly, very cheaply. And then, you know, it became down an economic conversation, which was, is your ARPU higher than your CPI? And if that is true, then you're profitable and then you scale. And, you know, it was a very much like a make hay while the sun is shining moment for a lot of people out there. Sadly, over the last sort of 18 months to 2 years, there has been a downturn in the number of games going to market, the number of installs happening on a daily basis. Like if you look at any of the sort of core top line metrics, you know, you can see that gaming, whilst revenue might be up, gaming as a whole is down, and the small and medium guys are the ones that are losing out, right? The big ones are continuing to power through, and this is where the disparity lies from a lot of companies saying, hey, things are amazing, but these are the big companies who are unaffected by such changes. So the evolution into hybrid is essentially trying to capitalize on everything that people learn, including Kwalee, during the hyper-casual stage. And essentially this is focusing again on really good core mechanics, but quite simplistic, sticky stuff that is easily developable in a shorter time frame rather than your 2-3 year development cycles. And it's about then evolving that to become you know, deeper, and that comes from increased meta, that comes from live ops, that comes from events, and that comes from cultivating a more loyal audience, right? Which, you know, Peggy and I did something for Forbes recently, which was great. And, you know, the idea of a 7-day LTV curve is very foreign now, but 2 years ago, that's what people were looking at. So if you're able to, you know, work and build out a very loyal user base that of 30 days, 90 days, 360 days, then you're going to find much more success in this market. And this is essentially what hybrid is doing. It's improving the monetization metrics. It's, you know, making a deeper experience, which bringing people back time and time again for longer periods of time, which is having a direct correlation and increase to the LTV and the ARPU, ARPDAU, any of the financial metrics. And we've gone from, you know, your average ARPU of 30 to 50 cents to with hybrid $1.50 to $2, which in the current market with UA becoming ever more difficult through IDFA deprecation or through just the general amount of supply in the industry has gone down, which means that the cost of that supply and the demand has gone up, which means that the cost of the supply, the CPM has gone from say $20, $25 back up to $35, $40, which again means that your CPI has gone up. And this is why hybrid is a winning formula because it's taking all of the fun, quick stuff that everyone learned from hyper. It's adding in this deeper meta and maybe the ability to monetize more effectively and increase the monetization. And then it's still allowing you to be marketable and make a profit.
So just to touch really briefly on hypercasual, do you think it's had its day? Do you think it's ever going to kind of come back through in a way?
I personally don't, Brian. I'm going to be very ruthless and say I think it's dead. And there's a lot of people who would argue with me and say, no, it's not. I think anyone worth their salt who was successful in hypercasual is now chasing hybrid. And the days of finding profitability at 40 cents, 50 cents is near impossible based on the numbers I'm seeing. Again, if your CPMs have gone up by 50% on the UA side, and the CPI has therefore gone up by the same amount, your CPIs, which were 35 cents, 40 cents, are now 60, 70 cents. If you relatively stayed the same, then you're down, right? You're negative. You're making a loss. And I think anyone who tries to operate in the same way without improving the monetization and the complexities of the game will just find themselves either eating into the margin they had or being, at a loss.
And I'm going to pull you back to IDFA and the whole, approach to the ongoing changes around privacy and, the use of data. How are you finding it? Do you think we've seen the last of the changes?
I don't know if the worst is behind us, if I'm honest. I don't know. I mean, we know that Google Sandbox is coming, right? And a lot of people have been very strongly leaning on Android. And if you look at the spend difference, like if we would go back like 2 years ago, people would predominantly be spending on iOS, right? So maybe 70% of the spend would be iOS, 30% of Android, because the iOS users were more valuable, more affluent, however you want to describe it. And then I think if you look at the market now, it's probably more like 50-50, right? So Android has eaten up a lot of the spend because people still have somewhat of an ability to target in a better way. We're seeing scan updates happening on a regular basis, and you see that something's gone out, and then everyone's deciding if they're going to go to market first, and then they wait, and then there's another update, and then people are seeing what the impact is, and I still think it's a very sort of like turbulent time for people learning iOS and how to navigate in the current market. I personally hope that Apple eventually make things a little bit easier, right, and give back some of that, but who knows? They also have their own strategy, right? And we know like Apple search ads is a big growing sector for them, and we need to find out exactly what that means for the future.
One thing I wanted to get to is one thing that we jumped on, and we didn't have enough time because you came to the rescue, John, with some amazing insights on loyalty, because not a lot of game studios are looking at it the way you are. And that's why you ended up, of course, in my article. But you talked about things that we couldn't dive into, such as, for example, the idea of adopting what you call a loyalty-driven approach to growth. We couldn't explore it. But we can now. So I'd like to ask you to delve a little bit deeper into that. What is that? Because I think there are some lessons in there for studios just beginning to look at retention and ways to extend the life cycle.
I think it's a mindset shift, Peggy, because historically or over the last couple of years, everyone's main core focus has been the acquisition of the user, right? Get the user into the game. Worry about your DAO. Worry about your MAU. And then again, especially for hyper casual and more casual games, it was a case of, get them in, get them through the machine and the cycle, the fatui, all of that stuff. And eventually if they churn, right, then they go to another game, so be it. I believe now what companies need to be focusing on is actually the longevity of users, right? And building an environment which actually allows that user to stay for, as I put it, a year. And I think if you look at the most successful gaming companies in the world, your Supercells and companies of this ilk, this is what they've done for years. This is not rocket science. This is putting your users first and building out an environment through live ops, through events, through guilds, through community, and establishing something that will allow people to, and through multiple reasons why, to come back more often. And we all know if you've got more sessions per day and your session lengths are longer and your retention is longer, you are going to make more money. That is basic, economics in games. So again, it's a mindset shift from focusing purely on how do we get as many users as cheaply as possible to how do we maximize our users moving forward.
So just exactly that, because what you shared with me, and that was mind-blowing, by the way, a 40x higher LTV is what you told me. You were able to get more value out of your payers, which is really what it's about. It's not necessarily getting everybody, but understanding who your payers are, getting them to do more. So first of all, congratulations on that. 40x is massive.
Thank you.
Massive.
It's a sensational number. I can't take the credit for it. I've got to shout out to the Kwalee marketing team and the strategies that they're putting together to really, focus on that, and obviously partnering with companies like Misplay who did the report. There's some great companies in market that are really trying to live by this strategy of user first. And it for me it goes back to WoW hunting like we did 5-6 years ago, but now we don't have the targeting to be able to do that before they hit the app. And now is like establishing the persona of your whales once they've hit the app, and then maximizing the amount of money you're able to generate from them. And there's going to be, it's going to be fractional, right? It's literally less than 1% of users, less than 0.5% of users. But if you can target them effectively and give them the experience they require and draw them back time and time again, then your base averages start increasing because of how effective you're targeting those high value users.
So delve a little bit deeper just for a moment, like how you did that. We talked about the report, for example. I wrote about the report, and there were like things in there like, yes, real world rewards are going to work as well. It can be tangible, it can be intangible, it can be incentivized. There's a lot of different like flavors of how to get someone to invest more time in your game.
I think we're actually at the beginning of all of this, to be completely honest, Peggy. There are some examples from yesteryear, and I would like to probably just expand on one, which is the Zynga and their VIP strategy. And you see this in casual or social casino games, right? The games where you see high value players spending thousands of dollars a year on in-app purchase. But what I always loved with Zynga's white glove approach was they actually isolated their whales, right? They know who they are through internal means, and then they give them some incredible real world experience and service. Like Zynga would fly people out to Las Vegas and give them helicopter rides and give them private experiences where they would be exposed to to the people making the games, and they would be included in the product stages and shown new features. And Zynga get a lot out of this, but these people who are these hardcore elite, where do they get that elsewhere? Right, that level of and again at Kwalee, we're not something as grand as that because we're not Zynga, but we're trying to give those bigger experiences and that one-to-one service and speak to our users more regularly, get their involvement in focus groups, and just try and make them feel part of the process. These people love our games and they love games in general, so why not give them that bit more and make them influential in what you're developing? Obviously, again, there's also the case of just customizing your general experience to ensure that certain users get different offers. And from a live ops perspective, my personal standpoint on live ops is if you're not doing it right now, you're going to pay the price long term. And if you don't have long-term events and live ops strategy focusing on different personas of users, then you're not going to go the distance and you're not going to survive long-term. Or you might still be on the map, but you're never going to exceed expectation.
And I think this brings us back to the point you made earlier, John, which is it doesn't seem to be enough to build that into individual games, and so within a game you've got your onboarding, you've got the player being looked after, but you have to look at this from a company perspective and then across your catalogue as a whole.
Yeah. Again, I don't think things like cross promotion, right? Something that was done a lot, 5-6 years ago, and you would get, Zynga especially. Again, I don't want to keep name dropping them, but they're great at what they do. Obviously, I'm a fan, but the ability to use cross promotion to get a user from one app to another, and ensuring that they stay in. Interestingly, the RovioCon event last week, Sega was talking about the Segaverse, right? And now Rovio is part of the Segaverse, and not just from a transmedia perspective, but also ensuring that the users are going from one part of the Segaverse to another in different ways. I definitely think building out that universe, either smaller or bigger, depending on how you strategize on it. But just by ensuring that these users stay within your catalog and your portfolio is very, very important, and also a lot of the time what you see is a user that maybe has been in one app for a long time, the value of that user goes down steadily over time, right? They join, they're doing that purchases, and eventually they start getting tired or bored, and they look for something. So the average revenue per day per that user starts tearing off. But then if you then take that user into another game, they go through that initial courting process, right? Like where they're going, they're enjoying, they're liking, they're going through the futurity, they're getting that euphoric new moments. Then their average revenue per day starts increasing again, right? So if you can, keep funneling the user through the multitude of apps that you have and ensure that you're maximizing the average revenue per day per user for those users, then overall you're net positive and you're making more money. So it's definitely an important strategy.
And is this something that Kwalee are actively pursuing? And is the hybrid casual approach kind of playing to that? Because obviously, hyper casual, you were in, you were out, you were fast, and the games were so small that you didn't have the opportunity to get any of that meta game experience in. So you starting to build out something that's recognizably Kwalee with it, across your portfolio.
I definitely think that from a top line business strategy perspective, brand recognition is becoming ever more important. And I think as a business, we are doing a lot of thought leadership, and I'm doing a lot of stuff in market at the moment. We're doing this event, and again, it's about transcending the one app experience to being a multi-app experience for the users. And whilst we might be doing different genres of games or different styles of games, because Kwalee are not just limited to hybrid, we are doing casual and other. We have PC console, and we have a lot of different facets as a business. But ultimately, ensuring that the user now understands that it's Kwalee, I think, has more value. And so this is why maybe even from above the line marketing, traditional stuff, sponsorships, you name it, all of this stuff becomes a little bit more important because of that brand recognition and ensuring that people will go to the Kwalee store page and be like, oh, okay, I know that Kwalee games are high quality, they're fun. What else is in the catalogue that I can play? So I definitely think this is a part of big business strategy, not just for us, but I think everyone needs to focus on this again.
When it comes to this approach, have the benchmarks changed for you, John? Are you still looking? We've talked about, LTV, ARPU, etc. The usual benchmarks. But on this longer term, building loyalty, how exactly are you measuring that?
Yeah, so I think that the main difference, Brian, is the metrics themselves hasn't changed, right? Like in terms of retention, still important. Monetization, ARPU, ARPDAU, important. What has changed is the importance of the long tail, right? So previously, day 1, day 3, day 7, that's what you worried about, right? And if you got 0 at day 10 or 0 at retention or new revenue at day 14, it wasn't that important. Now you have to make sure that you're optimizing the LTV curve to be going for 30 days, for 60 days, 90 days, and ensuring that these metrics back out on a much longer basis. So because of that, you are adapting your gaming experiences, and from a content perspective, your content has to be much bigger, right? You can't just put enough content to cover, 3 sessions of 20 minutes a day, so 7 hours of gameplay, because that means at the end of the 1 week, people are like, well, I've done all the levels, why am I coming back? And then they leave. So again, your content strategy is paramount. You need to have enough content to bring people back for a year. And again, live ops, events, all of this stuff is a way to add on that. But ultimately, your core gameplay need and your the number of levels you have, and if you look at even the likes of King and Dream Games, right, you see every month or every couple of months they're adding 500 more levels, right? And I think King just on Candy Crush just did the 20,000th level, right? And it was a big deal. So yeah, you need to ensure, from that perspective, the depth of the game, not just the meta, but everything has the ability to draw people back.
So is it drawing them back? Because I mean, I get that, and I saw also in the recent loyalty report from Misplay that players want to progress. But then I'm also hearing you say, no, if you build a brand and you have a proper portfolio, maybe it's not just progress in the game, but progress in my universe, because that's a whole lot easier than coming up with 20,000 levels for one single game.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, Peggy. It's a different point of or another prong of another strategy, right? It's still overall the idea is to bring value to users and ensure that the user is having an enjoyable experience and staying around. But if you're unable to, some games, the longer someone plays, the more money they generate, right? Like again, games like Dream Games and Royal Match and King and Candy Crush, what you find is people who stay around longer generally spend a bit more money the longer it goes, because the games get harder and the in-app purchase frequency needs to increase for them to keep up with the difficulty, right? But then other games, again, if they're not focused or built in the economy of such, as built in such a way, then it starts tearing off. So those games, it's more important to ensure the portfolio is stronger. But for the games that with the right shop economy and the puzzle format, and again the couple of companies I just mentioned, they're not too much worried about this. But then Dream Games have a new game, which is out now, right? And King have a portfolio of games. So even the ones who do that strategy very well still focus on new business and a new experience. So I think it's definitely you have to do both.
Yes, you do mobile, but you do PC. And, we're talking about genres. It's a little bit of hybrid casual, maybe some casual. Big question, maybe not the easiest answer, but where you see the growth, because you are so spread across all these areas.
Yeah, look, I'm in a very good position, and ultimately the reason I joined Kwalee is because the company overall, we're an independent funded business, and we're very fortunate to have David Darling, who's our founder, and was also the founder of Codemasters. If you're familiar with the Codemasters story, that eventually sold to EA for $1 billion plus. I think it's like 1.3, 1.4. So we're very fortunate that in this incredibly difficult market, we have someone behind us who is a stalwart of gaming. David was knighted by the Queen for his efforts in games, right? So he's one of the he's been in games for nearly 40 years. He was coding at 15, and the guy's in his 50s. He's an absolute, in my opinion, an absolute legend in the game. For us, because of that, we're in a different position where we can take some more risks, and David himself is a risk taker. And this is why we have 4 core parts of the business right now. We have my division, which is the publishing division. We have our internal games division, which is focusing on hybrid. We have another internal division, which is focusing on casual. And then we have PC console. There's not a lot of companies that are able to do that right now because of the cost implications and stuff like that. So we're very fortunate. But we do see growth in all of those areas. And I think, I would say the one that's growing the most, not just to call myself out, but I think publishing is proving very successful at the moment. And a lot of that comes from the fact is that the market is quite difficult for a lot of people now, and the ability to launch games, solo launch games has become more difficult, and you do need a big team. I put a post this week talking about, you need an army to publish a game, and I listed out 12 disciplines that you need, including product and production and marketing and growth. And this is why also, I keep talking about the big guys are going to succeed because they have the resources and funds to be able to do so. So I think if you have the resources and funds, publishing at the moment is going to be a great avenue for you, and I think something that can be really successful. If not, I think again hybrid is the safe bet. It's where we're spending probably 50% of our time is focusing there, and then we're taking a few more risks on casual and casual plus, more like mid-core games. But these, those genre of games have the ability to generate 10, 20, 50 million in lifetime, right? Whereas hybrids, the likelihood is that most of those games would be more short-lived. And the life cycle of those games would be more 6 to 12 months rather than 3-4 years. So you need to balance that. You need to, have success in the short term, but also having an eye on the future and long-term strategy.
I think that says it all, really. If you were just tuning in and you just got that answer, you're set. And I have to look for that post, by the way, because you are prolific out there writing as well. John, speaking and writing, I'm impressed.
Honestly, Peggy, I don't know how you've done it as a career. It's the most difficult thing in the world is writing content. I'm currently spending like 4 or 5 hours on a Sunday in front of a laptop with my dog and my wife, trying to come up with stuff that I think is going to help people. It is so difficult. I don't envy you guys in the media business. I'm much happier behind the screen, talking about games, really.
Based on this conversation, there's an awful lot. Stick at it, John, because there's an awful lot in there I think that can really help people out there across the whole of the games ecosystem. Talk about information density. There was a lot in the last 30 minutes for people to unpick, and I'm sure every listener is going to walk away with something of value. But we won't let you go before we ask you 2 final questions. Every guest gets asked, what is it that you're playing right now? What's obsessing you that you're maybe playing a little bit too much when you should be off writing 800 to 1,000 words of good quality content? And then secondly, favourite game of all time?
Okay, great questions. I'm a big fan of this. I get asked this every now and then. So my favourite game at the moment is Monster Hunter now. I am absolutely obsessed with it. I think I've just broke like level 52, so I'm like a hardcore player. But for me, it's an IP I love. I love Monster Hunter. I love anything. I'm a JRPG fan, and JRPG, like Japanese role-play games, are my favourite of all time. So I love the fantasy element, I love the escapism of it, like my favourite books are Lord of the Rings. And anything, as you can see the poster behind me, I love anything that's over the top, and Monster Hunter is over the top. It's the gigantic weapons, gigantic monsters. This with Monster Hunter now, it's obviously location based, and I have a dog, so I walk the dog a lot, and I'm playing an hour walking around the streets looking like a psycho whilst I'm tapping my phone with the dog. And it gives me a lot of Pokemon Go vibes because I was also massively in that. And I think, it's already Niantic's second biggest game of all time after Pokemon Go. I really, really love it. And they are also just starting to develop their live ops and event strategy, as we spoke about today. That's super important. And I think they've done it really well with limited time monsters and events and other things that you need to do which are outside the norm. So I'm thoroughly enjoying it. If you are someone who likes to be outside, I think it's a great companion for you. My favourite game of all time, and again, as a JRPG is my favourite genre, it's got to be a toss-up between Final Fantasy VI and Final Fantasy VII. So I think Final Fantasy VI, in my opinion, it was the last one of the series on the SNES. So, from a story perspective, from a gameplay perspective, the ATB system was never been better than in that. The storyline, the character development, the aspects of the game where anything was unset, and there's in that game there's characters that can die forever, and that's not something that was ever done. It's also the only game I've ever known where the bad guy wins and then does something very tragic, and then the good guys come back. And Final Fantasy VII, what's to say? It's upper echelon game for anyone who's of a certain age. And again, they just did the remake, and the second part of the remake's coming out soon. Any game that gets a remake says a lot, and I think if you ask a lot of people, it's in their top 10. For me, it's top 1 or top 2. I go through phases as why Final Fantasy 6 is better than 7, 7 is better than 6. But 7 for me, the big thing was, I was 12 or 13 when it came out on the PS1, and it was the first time you saw 3D graphics. And we look back and laugh at these blocky characters now, but at the time, I was like mind blown. This is a new universe. Like, what is this stuff? And I still have extremely fond memories of playing that the first time. And I've played through it maybe a dozen times in my life since. So yeah, look, I love everything about it. And I think if you've never played it, you have to play it now. And you can get it on Switch and a bunch of other platforms. So check it out.
I actually want to go and play Final Fantasy 6 and 7 again now. So yes, absolutely. Job done, John.
Absolutely. If you're going to build brand, you're good at marketing. You got us going. I think you're in. I think this is the timing for you. And speaking of time, I want to thank you for taking the time as well, John. I mean, it was really a lot in there, but that's the beauty of it. Actually, I'm going to share with you the transcript of this because I'll bet you've got about 5 blogs in here as well.
Thanks, Peggy.
Exactly.
Any opportunity to not write would be quite good. I feel much more comfortable talking than writing. Put it that way.
Speech to text is your friend, John.
Do you know what, Brian? I think you've cracked it. I think that's what I've got to do.
But seriously, thanks ever so much. And Brian, aren't you glad we had him?
Hugely, and determined. We say to a lot of guests on the show, you must come back, but we really do want you to come back on, John. Hopefully in and around, whether it's PGC, whether it's your own event.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, guys, and I would love to come back. And I extend the invite to you and all the listeners to join us for the Kwalee event at the start of next year.
It's a date, John. Thank you.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the time, guys. I really appreciate it.
This show is all about how to do your job better, how to make an amazing game, how to market it, and you have a say. So if you have a story or know someone we need to shine a light on, then we would love to hear from you.
We want to hear from you. We want to reflect the reality of the mobile games market in all its wonderful complexity and strangeness. So if you have any suggestions for us, if you have any feedback for us, you can always get in touch. You can email us at podcast@pocketgamer.biz. You can find us on Twitter @PG.biz, and you can reach out to us through the pocketgamer.biz website. If you're interested in listening to all of our podcasts, you can find them at pocketgamer.biz/podcast, and we would love to hear your thoughts on future shows.
And we've got you covered on all the major platforms, so subscribe to the audio podcast, as Brian said. Look for us on YouTube. If you want to read it, hey, you can do that too, because we have a companion post for you as well on the pocketgamer.biz website.
Tune in again for the next edition of the pocketgamer.biz podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you in the near future. Until then, I'm Brian Baglow.
I'm Peggy Ann Saltz, and that's a wrap until next week.